Oh, excuse me. For our next presenter, we have Michael O'Brien, and he's going to be talking about modeling trend and alternative urban growth scenarios for South Central Arizona in the year 2050. Michael?
Thanks. She's right. I am Michael O'Brien, and I am going to be talking about urban growth scenarios in South Central Arizona to 2050. So here's the table of contents. We'll do a quick intro to the study area and the project. I'll talk a little bit about my analysis methods, and then the good part, which is the results. After that, I'll make a couple of conclusions, and we'll have questions if there are any. Okay, so by way of introduction, we'll look at the study area and also the research questions I've asked about the study area. And this is it, South Central Arizona, Maricopa, Pinal, and Pima counties. And this is about 15 million acres, and as of 2013 there were about 5.3 million people here. Zooming in a bit, you can see that there are two main metros. There's Phoenix, and actually Metro Phoenix includes Maricopa and Pinal counties. That's about 4.3 million people. And then you've got Tucson, which is, well, Metro Tucson is all of Pima County, and that's about 1 million people. And those numbers are going to go up. They're going to go up a lot pretty quickly. Maricopa really jumps out at you here in green at the top. It's going to add, well, let me back up a second. This is all according to the Arizona Office of Employment and Population Statistics. So according to them, Maricopa is going to add more than 3 million, Pima about 500,000, and then Pinal just shy of 1 million, but notice that Pinal's population is basically tripling. Notice also that I'm starting at 2006. That's a function of some of the data that I used as an input, but pretty much the period that we're going to be talking about is 26 through 2050. Okay, so when you see those charts, kind of the first question that comes to mind is, where are all those people going to go? And you can sort of frame that more politely by saying how much land is likely to develop, and also where is that development likely to take place. Once you've answered those questions, it's pretty easy to answer a couple of more, one of which is how much is it going to cost to provide infrastructure to all this new development, and then after that it's also pretty easy to figure out what's lost when the new development comes in, what's sort of bulldozed. And then the tricky question is, how might the answers to the first four questions change if we vary some of the criteria that we have, like density and the rate of redevelopment. And just as a reminder, redevelopment is the reuse of an already developed parcel. It can involve renovation or rebuilding, but not necessarily. Okay, a little bit about methods. First, data. This is a data-hungry analysis. Lots of different inputs from a lot of different sources. All of this was publicly available, which is really nice. And some of the maps are in different projections, but the analysis was conducted in UTM 12N with the North American 83 datum. And this is kind of a high-level overview of the process. And we're just going to basically take each color, which is a phase, one at a time, and look at sort of how it works and what it does. If you want details, I'm going to show you a website in a second, and you can actually download the paper there too if you're really bored. So first off, in the top right corner, these squares are an attempt to address the question, how much land is likely to develop? And the math behind that is super simple. It's a proportion. And the idea is that the ratio of recent population change to recent development, acreage-wise, is the same as the ratio of upcoming population change to projected developed acreage. So we know 3 of those, 2 thanks to AOPS, 1 we can get from the National Land Cover Data Set, and then we just solve for this. And I'll show you the numbers in just a minute, but let's finish up with the methods. The next question, where is all this development likely to occur? This is a trickier one, actually. And what I did was start with a regression analysis to help identify some of the spatial variables that have driven development recently. And for example, I looked at about a dozen, but these are 3 that look nice and fit on the map. So we have distance from major roads, basically travel distance from Phoenix or Tucson downtown, and then also income. And so like I say, I fed about a dozen of these variables into SPSS, the statistical program that we use here, and it worked its magic and spit out a list of 8 variables that together account for about 70% of the variation in recent development's location. So these are listed here. Really don't have time to get into them. But they're proximity, suitability type variables. And in the second column, whoops, wrong button. In the second column, you've got the type of correlation from the beta coefficient. You guys probably remember this. I know Gary does, because this is a method that Gary taught us back in the spring. And so what you do, a la Christofferson, is use those beta coefficients to create a predictive surface, which is what you see here. And in darker colors are areas that are more likely to develop, and then in blue are areas that are probably not going to develop anytime soon. So while we're here, just notice real quick that tribal lands are less likely to develop. Also remote areas, and you can kind of see here that steep areas are also not that likely to develop. Let me say one other thing about this. This kind of implies that development can happen anywhere in the region, and we know that's not true because a lot of land is, well, it's already developed, or it's underwater, it's in conservation, it's a right-of-way, something like that. So when you take all those areas out using what's called a development mask, this is what's actually available to develop, which isn't nearly as much. And when you have this surface, what you can do is basically query it and pull out the different scenarios. So let me show you what I mean by that. So here you can see a selection up in Maricopa County. What I've done is just select I've selected a bunch of cells that add up to the acreage that Maricopa will need during this period. And I just started at the top of the distribution, with most likely, and worked my way down until I had the right amount of acres. So, and then I did that, for each county, for each scenario, and then put them all together. Okay, this is a pretty simple solution. Really, I just took the projected acreage that is supposed to develop and multiplied that times a per acre infrastructure cost estimate. Those estimates are density dependent. They're anywhere from 50 to 65,000. And this is based on some recent literature. I didn't just pick these numbers. These should be fairly accurate. If you want to know what all's included in that, check out the website of the paper. So as far as land that's lost, that's another pretty simple calculation. It's just a matter of masking, or in effect clipping the National Land Cover data set and then tallying what is within that clipped area. So you start with land cover, you bring in projected development, that's what's within that area, and so that's what's lost, and you just add it up. Okay, and now the tricky question, how do the answers change when we vary some of the criteria of development? This was all, well, what I've just described is what I'm calling the trend scenario. It's a business as usual scenario. It's just what's happened recently projected out into the future. But I also looked at some alternatives, 7 of them, ran through all the same calculations for them as far as locating them and estimating the impacts that they'll have. Here's a list of them, and you can see that as you move down the list, density goes up as high as 2 times current density. And you'll also notice that some of these scenarios involve allocating about 10% of new population to redevelopment. So the results, first a couple of charts, and then we'll look at a map of the results. So here is a chart showing by county and also by scenario the acreage that's going to develop in each of the 8 different scenarios. So things range from the trend, which is something like 440,000 acres, all the way down to this denser scenario with redevelopment, and that's only about 200,000 acres. So a big drop off, and really the chart is kind of a striking way to think about how these development parameters will actually impact the future. And here's a look at estimated infrastructure costs. You can see that at the top we're coming in at about 22 billion, whereas with the sort of more compact, more redevelopment oriented scenario, we can save probably about 9 billion. And this is what's lost in each scenario. The lightest color is agriculture. That's really the biggest casualty in all scenarios. The next largest loss is open desert, which I'm calling desert scrub. And again, there's a huge savings, especially in open desert, as we move down into some of the denser scenarios. Okay, so some spatial results. And while this is coming up, let me say thank you to Peter Johnson and also Balaji Viswanathan for helping troubleshoot and improve this map. I appreciate it. I didn't see Peter, but Balaji, thank you. Okay, so here's the map actually on the site. And this is the trend scenario that I talked about first. And I think we can make kind of a few, that's not a great picture, but we can make a few generalizations about this. One is that Phoenix is going to grow a great deal on its western and also southeastern sides. Another sort of similar sweeping generalization is that Tucson is going to become a lot longer, especially along I-19 and I-10. And then finally, what you can kind of see as you step way back is that we're talking about a sort of an urban constellation here, running from Green Valley out to whatever's out there. And you know, that's 200 miles long and is going to be about 10 million people. So we're talking about something on the order of Baltimore, D.C. So get back to the mouse. Real quickly, the website is designed to let people visualize how the different scenarios should or might play out. And you can make comparisons here, obviously visually, and the charts are down here too to help with the quantitative piece. But let's just look real quick at the map of the trend scenario beneath scenario 8, which you remember is the densest. And you can see that everything that shows up in a shade of pink or red is the savings, the land that would have been developed but is saved by going with density and redevelopment. So it's more than 200,000 acres. And really, if you pan and zoom around the map, you can see that this really does affect how Phoenix and Tucson will look, or potentially could look, I should say. And let me also point out that if you do visit this site, please don't consider it accurate at very large scales. I don't think any development model is going to be accurate down at like the parcel and street level. And in fact, it won't zoom in past about 18,000. But as far as looking at the regional picture, that's more of what it's designed for. Don't try to make real estate decisions based on this. All right, back to the PowerPoint and a couple of conclusions. Whoa. Okay, so first, this top number is the acreage developed in the trend scenario. So almost 450,000 acres. There are some alternatives to that, fortunately. This translates to more than 700 square miles, which is, by comparison, the city of Phoenix right now, the city limits are about 500. So this is a huge area that's going to develop. As you saw on the map, it's going to be really dispersed, really strung out into a 200-mile-long megalopolis, if you want to use that word. And it's going to be very costly in infrastructure terms and also in terms of agricultural productivity and natural resources. And that future is going to look something like this, with a lot of single-family homes way out away from the city center. So there are some alternatives, as we saw. Getting an error message of some kind. There we go. Okay, so the alternatives are going to involve higher densities and redevelopment. We talked about that. And the benefits are less acreage developed, more compact and potentially more efficient cities, a pretty big savings in infrastructure expenditure, and of course less farmland and desert that's paved under. And that future it's going to look more like this level project here that's over on Park than the picture we saw on the previous slide. It doesn't have to all be high-rise, but some of it probably needs to go up. Okay, so I hope you'll check out the website. One thing is that the website works everywhere in the world except on the UA public Wi-Fi network. So if your phone is on that, you may have to switch. It works on the private network, so try that one. That's it. Are there any questions? Brett?
Yeah, I didn't see all the variables you used, but did you take climate change into account?
No, I didn't. In what way?
Just seeing if it might have an impact on basically slowing the migration here, if there are like water constraints or if it heats up, or I don't know. I guess it would be hard to monitor.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good idea. If Phoenix is suddenly getting to 130, it might not be so appealing. But no, I didn't get into that. That's a good idea. Taylor?
I noticed on your model you showed Indian reservations as able to be possibly developed but less likely. So how did you turn to how much less likely the land on Indian reservations was to be developed?
Great question. That was done through the black magic of SPSS. The regression process, it spat out those beta coefficients that went into the weighting of the different overlays, and it just weighted that one in such a way that it obviously makes a big difference, as you saw up here in this map. So that was quantified really by SPSS. Anybody else? Yeah.
I was wondering, in order to pursue the more dense sort of development,
Right?
in your personal opinion, do you think that's going to have to be something that might have to be legislated in order to make happen? Because I know a lot of people that come to the Southwest like the openness and
Right.
being able to go wherever they want to go.
Right.
What do you think?
I don't think it's going to be very popular, and honestly, that's kind of, this website is supposed to not quite scare people, but help them see the consequences of these incremental decisions that we're making. As far as actually changing things, I think it would probably work best around here with a sort of market type solution where you basically raise the cost of greenfield development, maybe through, I hate to say it, but a greenfield development fee or tax, something that sort of made it a little bit less attractive and really almost priced in some of those external costs that people don't pay when they buy far-flung homes and stuff like that. Really, that's just a way of making the real estate market work better. Whether people here will see it that way, I don't know. I think we're out of time, so.